Hey, welcome. And I want to do an introduction to SOAR, School of Awakening and Reformation. So in the next 9 minutes, I want to introduce to you 7 keys to understanding in a deeper and broader way the Declaration of Independence for these United States of America. Come on, let's go SOAR. So guys, here we go. 7 keys to unlocking the deeper, richer understanding of the Declaration of Independence for the United States of America. One of the things I want you to know in this very brief introduction is that indeed the Declaration of Independence provided for this young republic a Genesis-like formation and indeed a Genesis-like foundation. We are even going to, in SOAR, begin to look at scriptures like Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, and many more besides. But right now, I want to introduce to you the 7 principles to unlocking the dynamic, sustainable revelation of the Declaration of Independence. Number 1, the Declaration of Independence was unanimous. Now, that may seem a little bit odd place to begin, but I think it really is important that we understand that indeed it was unanimous. Now, certainly we all know, and history records, that a man by the name of John Dickinson out of Delaware actually voted against the Declaration of Independence. But we also know that his vote was overruled by his fellow delegates from Delaware. And so thus, Delaware, the nation's first state, really provided for the Declaration its greatest victory. So we want to remind you, key number 1, principle number 1, to unlocking the understanding of the Declaration and the earliest formation and foundational experiences of the young republic was indeed the power of agreement. Principle number 1. The second key that I want to share with you is the Declaration of Independence was indeed very respectful of those who were most affected by the separation. Now, the second principle that I want to introduce to you here really is the principle, if you will, of honor that we discover in the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration reads, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have committed them with another, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So in that principle right there, we begin to discover that these founding fathers begin to lay a foundation that is remarkable in its scope. And here we discover a real principle of honor that we're going to develop even more in the SOAR school. Principle number 3, or key number 3, is the Declaration was rooted in the belief that God valued human life and human liberty. Here we begin to discover the priority of life and liberty is absolutely found in the Declaration of Independence. They wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are empowered by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Key number 4 is that the Declaration was secure. The Declaration of Independence was secure against an avalanche of abuse by authority, both in that time and even in our own. So here we find the 4th key, which is the protection against tyranny. Humanity has the right to disband government if that government abolished the rights of the people. And so we begin to read, even in the Declaration, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deserving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new form of government. Friend, this was a radical proposal in 1776. This was a radical proposal for all humanity, and it begins to provide both the foundation and the formation of a nation unlike any other in the history of humanity. Key or principle number 5 is the Declaration of Independence was a sensible document. Here we begin to find the purity, if you will, of sensibility, the purity of a sensitivity even. Its ideas that were found in the Declaration of Independence, they were indeed radical for their time and even in ours. And yet, even though they were radical, they were not impractical. As a matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence did not justify the continuous overthrow of other governments. And I think we need to know that. As a matter of fact, the Declaration reads, "Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient reasons," unquote. So we begin to discover that the Declaration of Independence was indeed pure in its sensibility. It was pure in its sustainability. Principle or key number 6 is that the Declaration of Independence was justifiable. And we know that the Declaration of Independence laid out literally 27 bullet points against the king and against the kingdom of Great Britain. But we also begin to discover that those principles might have been greatly interpreted or understood within the context of that time. There were great underlying principles in the Declaration that are true in every time, and they are true in every generation. So here we begin to find principle or key number 6 is the principle of sustainability. Why? Because the Declaration of Independence was justifiable. These 27 bullet points or facts, they candidly prove that the king's absolute tyranny over these states. And that was exactly what the Declaration was addressing. Principle or key number 7. The Declaration of Independence was an appeal to the supreme judge of the world. And here we begin to discover in the Declaration of Independence the power of an appeal. It was, it was indeed a document that was mandating an appeal to heaven. The Declaration states that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are abolished from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. So we begin to realize that indeed the Declaration of Independence was a strong appeal to heaven, an appeal to the supreme judge of the world. Now, once we begin to get into SOAR and we begin to dig deeper into the foundational and formative principles, that we begin to discover the great promise of the covenant of God for the nations of the earth. One of the things that we begin to discover in the Declaration of Independence, that indeed from its earliest formation and rock solid in its foundation, we find these two principles. The Declaration of Independence championed human life and it championed human rights. So come on, guys, if you want to learn more or if you want to go deeper with us in this study, come go with us now as we begin to soar and we begin to look at the formation of this republic and the covenant promise of God released in nations for her greatest awakening. So come on, let's go soar.